What is going on, guys? I wanted to come back to you this afternoon and bring you a video. And in this clip I'm going to show you in a minute, there's Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, man. He is testifying in front of the State House Health Committee in Tennessee. They have introduced a bill to ban gender-affirming care in minors. And you see kind of Matt Walsh and House Democrat kind of get into a little bit of a tussle. But anyways, guys, if you would, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Thanks.
Quick question for you. We've heard in the news last week and even today that it's pro-life to vote against this bill. We've heard that suicides are prevalent, and suicide has impacted my family, so I'm sensitive when I hear something like that. I've read some of the stuff that you've done, and I was wondering, can you speak to the statistics of mental health and suicidal tendencies for the people who have gone through transition and for people who have not? In your studies, from what I've read, can you speak to that?
Mr. Walsh, you recognize.
Sure. Well, the claim that doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention, the claim that this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out. And one of the reasons for that is that there couldn't possibly be any credible long-term studies because we've never done this to kids on this scale ever before in history. So this current, shall we say, crop of children, they are the guinea pigs. This is all experimental. We're sort of trying it out on them to see if it works. Now, they have attempted a few times to do studies, and the interesting thing is that the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH, which is a radical far-left pro-trans organization, they commissioned a study to try to prove that that hormones and puberty blockers decrease suicide rates among trans-identified youth. And even in their own study, they found that they couldn't prove it. They couldn't make that link because it's just not possible to do. The other thing I would mention too is that, the number of trans-identified youth has skyrocketed in recent years. We're talking about exponential 10x, 20x growth. Just huge numbers have increased. And what we hear from the pro-trans side is that, well, this is not a social contagion. It's just that, there's always been this many trans people. It's just that they were not in an affirming environment before in history, and so they couldn't come out. And now, for the first time, trans people have the ability to live their truth, so to speak. Well, if that's the case, and there have always been these sort of like millions of trans people, and if it's also true that if we don't affirm them, that it would cause them to commit suicide, then we should be able to look back in history and find just this unbroken, incredible epidemic of children mysteriously killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans. And what you find is that that didn't exist. I mean, the youth suicide rate has increased exponentially alongside trans affirmation. So trans affirmation causes the suicide rate, not the other way around. The last thing I'll note is that the suicide rate among trans-identified people is sky high. It remains sky high. All the data shows this. It remains sky high even after surgery. And in fact, in the most reliable data that we have, it's years after surgery when suicidality is the highest for trans-identified people. That's the reality.
Professor, you good? Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, that's really good, man. I'm glad you brought that up, man. How do we know, man? Wouldn't we have seen kids killing themselves right and left 30 years ago? If this was a thing, man, if people were trans or trans-identified beforehand, wouldn't they have been committing suicide and high numbers of kids dropping dead 30 years ago because they identified something else? No, it's not that at all, man. It's, maybe, just maybe has to do with certain things being pushed, all over social media and everything else. I mean, the Grammys. I mean, come on. The first transgendered woman winning an award, Satan dancing, I mean, maybe, just maybe, the world we live in has an impact on our kids. Possibly.
Walsh, while we're out of session, Mr. Hammer, Representative Hammer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I found it interesting. One of our people testified today that they had their gender affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who's mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says, even going so far as to say, 16 people, when you're 16, you should be married and could be pregnant or should be pregnant. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Yeah, that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago, in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about. How does that relate to this subject?
Just curious of your definition of if you feel like people are adults at 16 should.
No, people are adults at 18, but actually, your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. So we should be having a conversation about whether we should even be doing these surgeries to people at 18. But certainly before 18, it's absurd. I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed? Do you? No?
We do not. Yeah, we ask the questions. It's not. It's Representative Hammer. You are recognized.
We ask the questions here. You don't ask them, because again, man, they can't answer the questions, man. They don't want him putting anything on them. Again, man, he's like, no, you're 18, you're an adult. Your brain's not fully developed until you're like 25. But the whole idea of, well, can a 16-year-old consent? Are they an adult? Well, no, they're not an adult, and no, they can't consent. Do you believe they can consent? Do you believe a 16-year-old can consent to have a body part removed? And quiet. Crickets. Nothing. Nobody answers. Because again, man, if they did, and if they said, well, no, that proves the point right there. No. Kids are not old enough to understand. A 16-year-old is not old enough to understand what they're doing and what impact they will have on their life. They're not old enough to understand that. But again, these people know that.
No more questions. Okay. Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your healthcare education experience?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
My experience in healthcare?
Your educational background. I'm just curious. You've testified as to a lot of your own research. So I'm curious for what purpose you do that and what background you have to qualifies you to speak to that.
Well, my background that qualifies me to speak to this is that I'm a human being with a brain and common sense, and I have a soul. And so, therefore, I think it's a really bad idea to chemically castrate children. That is my experience. Also, I did. Now, it's true. I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read, so I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
And for what purpose do you conduct your research and use this brain of yours?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
I use it for the purpose of trying to protect children from being castrated and mutilated. That's one of the things I try to do.
You don't use it to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't use it to get clicks on your publication?
Well, are you using it right now to try to get clicks with this interaction? No, I really like the idea of getting, of drawing attention to the fact that this is happening to children. I know you seem to find it very amusing. I don't.
Again, yeah. I mean, he's 100% correct. 100%, man. What what qualifies me to talk on that? Well, as a human being, man. What qualifies me to talk on that? Again, man, human being. Am I a medical expert? No. But I think it's wrong, man, to chop healthy body parts off a kid who's 16 years old or whatever because they want to be, they now want to be a girl or whatever. I mean, yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong, man. And I think at one time, man, and not too many years ago, this wouldn't even be up for debate. We wouldn't be talking about this at all. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think people with common sense, they understand, you know what? A 16-year-old doesn't have the capability of understanding what they're doing, what they're signing up for. So anyone that pushes them, even a so-called medical expert that is pushing them in that direction, that's child abuse, man. Because again, how do they know? How do they know what's best for that kid? And again, man, not too many years ago, we would have called the person a quack, the doctor quack, for even suggesting that teenager become the opposite sex, even though, of course, they can't be. They can never be. But they would have been called a quack, man. We wouldn't have put up with that kind of stuff. But now all of a sudden we do. Really? Man, I think people need to think about what's going on.
Representative Clemens.
Well, you made a lot of misrepresentations and characterizations in your comments, so I think it's fair for me to question your background.
What are I mischaracterizing?
Let me finish, please.
You're recognized, Representative Clemens.
If you're going to come before a committee and make mischaracterizations and misrepresentations, it's fair game for us to ask you your educational background and your foundational knowledge for making such characterizations. That's my point. So I'm curious about you speaking to the development of the human brain by the age of 25. I seem to...
Number one, man, get right to the mischaracterizations. What do you mean? What are you talking about? If he can't ask you, if Matt's not allowed to ask you what you mean by mischaracterizations, then how can you respond to that? Again, you're labeling him as somebody who makes mischaracterizations. And if you're talking about the brain developing fully by age 25, it doesn't happen until that age. Yeah, that's pretty well established. But to say that he's making mischaracterizations and then not stating what those mischaracterizations are, I mean, how can you respond? And then you get mad when he asks, what do you mean? Then you get mad and you're like, let me finish. No, I just want to know what you're accusing me of. If you're accusing me of something, say what that is. Lay out what that is. But if you can't, don't.
I recall you advocating on behalf of firearm possession at the age of 18. Do you think that's appropriate?
Let's stay on the bill, please.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Yeah, well, can I respond to that?
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
I can't respond to what...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So...
Nope, you're not allowed to respond, man. He's not, I mean, so he sits there and says you make mischaracterizations and this and that and accuse him of things and say he does things, doesn't lay out what they are. Doesn't say a thing about what they are except for, supposedly your brain's not fully developed until you're 25. And you advocate for gun ownership for rifles and shotguns for 18-year-olds, which is the way that it is mostly in many states in this country. But again, man, it's like nothing else is said, and you're not even allowed to respond to it. That's what really is sick.
You know, I think your original article, blog post, or tweet, or whatever, kind of started this firestorm. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, where we need to look for these surgeries, because I'm still trying to find, you know, the surgeries, because, you know, the sponsor of the bill last week, I kind of agreed with him. I said, we need to split this bill into two parts. You know, I may agree with him on the surgery part, because I don't think it's happening. So, you know, you seem to have started this, so I need your evidence of where these surgeries are occurring in Tennessee. Could you give me, you know, places, times, maybe some names, or something that, you know, you know of?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
My evidence is the healthcare provider's own words. You know, I outlined Vanderbilt Health and their transgender care program, and the people that work for that program, their own words, talking about what they do, and talking about, for example, providing the chemical castration drugs to adolescent children. As far as surgeries, you know, double mastectomies do happen, and the way that I know that they happen is that after I called attention to this program at Vanderbilt, they said that they were going to stop performing, they were going to put a pause on the program that performs these surgeries on minors. And so if you're pausing the program that performs surgeries on minors, then I'm going to assume that the program existed. Otherwise, you couldn't have paused it. So now, the exact number of kids who are being subjected to this, I don't know exactly. It's really hard to come up with those numbers, I think, because the people doing it aren't really proud of it, and there's not a lot of interest on their end to tell us. But I do think that, you know, even one child being horrifically mutilated is too many. So I know that it's more than one, and that's reason enough to put a stop to this, I would say.
Yeah, I think what's funny, man, is he's a politician, man. He's on this committee, and he's unaware what's going on. Again, it was all over the news back in the fall. The Vanderbilt Medical, you know, the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, they were doing this. And I think also, man, Boston Children's Hospital, they were doing this too. But yeah, I mean, in their own words, they were doing this, man. And they got them on camera talking about this and how much money they were making off these things. They got them on camera, but this guy is unaware. You know, again, man, maybe he's I think he's in a food coma. Man, he likes his Twinkies and his ho-hos and his num-nums and what the hell ever. And he's in a food coma. You know, I mean, he's totally unaware of what's going on, man, because he's, you know, it's kind of like people that drink a little bit, you know, whenever they're stressed or whatever. He shoves, you know, an oatmeal cream pie or something in his mouth, you know, and makes him feel better, but totally unconscious, man. Totally unconscious.
President Mitchell, you recognize?
Yeah. So last week I had an amendment that, you know, we're looking to protect children from abuse. And I also had an amendment to stop cosmetic surgery of rhinoplasty and breast enhancements to minors. How would you feel about that? You know,
Sure.
Is that mutilation of children as well under the age of 18? They can't think for themselves?
Representative Mitchell, that's not on the bill that we have.
Yeah, it is. It's surgical. It's surgical.
I'm happy to answer that.
You're free to answer, Mr. Walsh.
Okay. My personal feeling about banning breast enhancements for minors? Yes, I would be all for, personally, I'd be all for banning that, absolutely. Yeah.
Representative Mitchell.
Okay, and so I think the previous representative, you know, proved that you have no medical background, correct?
No.
So you're here probably just as a public policy. You're trying to address good public policy, correct?
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
So I'll just have to question, you know, some of your public policy expertise when, I'm reading here, Singapore is able to have nice things in part because they execute drug dealers by hanging and arrest even petty vandals and thieves and beat them with a cane until they bleed. We don't have nice things here because we aren't willing to do what is required to maintain them. So, with statements like that, I kind of have to question your public policy beliefs. And, and you also stated there'd been no studies. Well, I'm sitting here holding a study from the American Academy of Pediatrics from the University of Pittsburgh about the suicidal disparities between transgender and cisgender adults and children. So I think, before you state things, you may need to know all the facts.
Yeah, he wasn't able to answer. They wouldn't let him answer what this guy's saying. Wouldn't let him answer it at all. But number one, man, talking about the disparities between cisgender and trans people, kids and adults, yeah, it's going to be higher among trans people because they're mentally ill. There's something going on there. It's not about, they're trapped in the wrong body. There's something wrong with them. And I'm not making light of that. They need help. They need care. Just not the care that you want them to get. And as far as his medical degree or whatever, what's yours? And as far as his public policy experience, man, no offense, but you didn't even realize that Vanderbilt University Medical Center was doing this. You don't even pay attention to what the reports are. You don't pay attention that tapes leaked last year. 2 tapes back in the fall leaked. And them talking about what they do. But again, man, so talking about public policy and then talking about things like, I think I know what he's talking about, man. I'm not gonna put words in Matt's mouth, but talking about the statement, making the statement said, I really, question your public policy, what you think is good policy, if you're making that kind of statement. He was making a statement that places like Singapore, they do whatever they feel is necessary to stop things. Stop crime from occurring, stop whatever. Not that we need that kind of stuff. But we defund police in this country. We try to take things, we try to point out the things that are wrong or that are bad. And yes, there are things that happen with police that are wrong, that are bad. But we blow everything up. Our media, blows everything up and plasters that kind of stuff all over everything. And sometimes they twist the facts of what's going on. But yeah, I mean, what he said, I think what he was saying was they do whatever they feel is necessary to stop criminal behavior. To stop the stuff, man. And we don't. We don't do anything, man. As a matter of fact, we give criminals cable TV and meals and everything, and air conditioning cells, and we make their lives as comfortable as possible in a lot of ways. But yeah, so but again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but again, man, these people, they're saying they were trying to make they're trying to make Matt look like the crazy one. But they ended up looking like the crazy ones, man, because Matt was standing behind truth. And when you stand with truth, you stand with something. You stand with something real. And that's what he was doing. And it's very hard to be defeated. It's very hard to be defeated when you stand with truth. But hey guys, if you would, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks. You son of a.